everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Lindsay Coulter, and today I'm going to be talking about planning a destination wedding. So a little over a year ago, I got married in Mexico to my husband, Taylor Jackson. We're both wedding photographers from Ontario, and we decided that we probably didn't want to get married at one of the many venues that we work at every single weekend. When we got engaged, we knew the natural option would be for us to have a destination wedding. We both love to travel. We really wanted to have the experience of traveling with all of our friends and family. We thought, what better way than to force them to come to a resort in Mexico with us to watch us get married. As wedding photographers, we've been lucky enough to travel to some really gorgeous destinations. Some of those include Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Mexico, a whole bunch of times, St. Martin, Roatan in Honduras, and the Bahamas. So after having traveled to all those gorgeous destinations, it was a little bit of a task for us to narrow it down, not just to a country, but also to an area, and then right down to a resort and a venue that we wanted to get married at. Because even though we had shot a bunch of destination weddings, we didn't really know what went into the planning side of things. Planning a destination wedding can be a daunting task for anyone. Most of us have a friend or a family member that we know that's gotten married somewhere locally, but very few people know someone that's gotten married abroad. And even if you do, they may not know the best way to do it. So I'm gonna give you some tips today to plan your best destination wedding in the simplest and easiest way possible. So the first thing to consider is, are there any countries that you absolutely love? Places that you've been already, that you know that you like to go to? Start there. If you know that you love the climate of Mexico or you love the beaches of the Dominican, if you love the people in Jamaica, if you've already been to a place that you know that you love, then start there. Taylor and I weren't super picky when it came to the country that we were going to get married in, but we did have a few other priorities that are probably some things that you should consider. One of the most important things to us was the flight time. We wanted to have as many people join us for our destination wedding as possible, and that meant that we wanted to make it as convenient for them as possible to come. We also knew that we had family members traveling with kids, and we didn't want to necessarily make them fly with a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old on an 8-hour flight. The other thing to consider is that you probably don't want to have any people connecting. If you have 65 people on connecting flights and one of those things gets delayed or somebody loses a bag, it will be an absolute disaster. The other thing that you're going to want to consider is your budget. Not only just for your wedding, but also for the trip, for your guests, and for yourselves. Keep in mind that now you're not only planning a wedding, but you're also planning a giant group trip for however many people decide they want to come. My suggestion is, if you want a lot of people to come, keep it as budget friendly as possible while still checking off all of the boxes on your amenities list. For Taylor and I, we decided that we wanted to keep our budget for the trip itself to be about $2,000 or under. Keeping the cost under $2,000 was a little bit more challenging than we had initially expected. One of the resorts that we were looking at was in Cabo, and the prices started at $2,500 per person, and that was not including an oceanfront view or a beachfront view or anything along those lines. It was literally just for a garden view room and including airfare. So obviously making sure that you know what your no-fly zone is above a certain price is super, super important. Once you've narrowed down the location and you have a list of a bunch of resorts that may fit within the budget that you're hoping to try and stick within, then it's time to start looking at what your resort may offer as far as wedding packages go. So some places just do not offer weddings. Of course, make sure that while you're searching for resorts that they do actually offer weddings and that it's something that they offer fairly frequently. Most resorts do show some starting packages on their website. It's really important to know that these are exactly that, starting packages. So if you have anything over 10 guests, or you're interested in having an open bar, or you're interested in having a welcome party, any of those things, they are absolutely going to be in addition to. So when you look on some of these resorts' websites and they say you can have a free wedding, that is not true. Well, it's sort of true, but you certainly get what you pay for when it comes to those packages. Once you've looked at the resort's wedding packages and you've seen their wedding venues and the locations on the property that you might be able to get married at, you've hopefully narrowed it down to a few locations that you really love. Now, some other things that you definitely want to consider. One is, how long is the travel time from the airport you're flying into until that resort? There are some places in the Mayan Riviera that are an hour and a half to 2 hours away from the airport. These buses that are taking you from the airport to your hotel do not have bathrooms on them. So you have to consider, if you're traveling with 60 people that have all just been on a plane for a few hours, they're probably gonna need to use a washroom, which means that it could take you an extra 2.5 to 3 hours from the time that you leave the airport until the time that you get to your hotel. If you have a smaller group, what they're gonna do is put you on a bus with a bunch of other people going to a bunch of different resorts, and you're gonna get to your resort way later than you would if you just booked a private transfer. So once you've narrowed this down, like, okay, our resort is within a reasonable distance from the airport, then of course you wanna make sure that the resort has all of the amenities that you're hoping for. Is it kid friendly? Is it adults only? Do they offer weddings frequently, or do they just do them here and there? Then you have to start looking at what their packages look like. Some of the resorts that we looked at had all-inclusive packages, so they would start around $10,000, and it would be like, do you want the greenery package? Do you want the vintage glam package? For Taylor and I, we really want to be able to customize things a lot more than that, so that was not gonna work. But if you want to just check off a box and be like, decor, done, perfect, then those resorts are definitely gonna be for you. The other thing you're going to wanna consider is how many vendors would you like to be bringing with you from your local area down to be involved in your wedding. So this might be something that you hadn't even considered as a possibility before, because you're thinking, so I have to pay $2,000 for myself, $2,000 for my husband, then a wedding package. This is gonna add up really quickly. Most resorts do try to incentivize couples to book large groups with them by offering a certain number of rooms for free or trips for free, depending on the number of guests that you have traveling with you. So depending on the cost of the resort, the time of year that you're traveling, and a bunch of other factors, you could be looking at getting a free room, which means probably double occupancy, but a free room for every 6, 8, or 10 rooms that you have booked. Our resort was a little bit more expensive, and being on the higher end, that meant that we had to book more rooms in order to get those free rooms. So the free rooms, you do still have to pay taxes and fees, but all in all, I think that we were looking about $300 per person versus the $2,000 per person. If you're not bringing vendors down with you, those could go towards your own trip, your parents' trips, maid of honor, whoever you're really a big fan of. So for our wedding, we brought 2 photographers, a videographer, and florists down with us. We also brought our DJ. We had a whole squad. Photo and video were obviously extremely important to us, so we made sure that we chose very well in those areas. Also, it may seem strange, but we did bring our own florist down. No, she didn't ship flowers with her from Toronto down to Cancun, but we did source flowers locally, and then she was able to put them together while we were at the resort. So I always tell my couples, if you value something and it's very important that it comes out looking and feeling the way that you had planned, then it's important to invest in it. Especially when it comes to a destination wedding, you may not always be getting exactly what you think that you're getting when it comes to flowers, photography, videography, DJ. Those are big things when it comes to your and your guests' experiences. So for us, it just wasn't worth risking. We wanted to work with the vendors that we loved, so we brought them to Mexico with us. Every vendor is going to be different, and you'll need to reach out to the ones that you're interested in booking. It depends on where you're getting married, what time of year it is, of course, how long the trip is, etc., etc., etc. However, some people may just take the cost of the trip and let that be their payment. Most photographers and videographers are going to expect a little bit more on top of that. I would say it's fairly uncommon for photographers and videographers to charge their full rate that they would charge at home in addition to travel. However, it definitely does happen, so if you have your heart set on someone, just be prepared for whatever that pricing may be. I think those are probably the 2 vendors that people most commonly bring down. However, if you are interested in bringing your own DJ, your own florist, just keep in mind that they're going to need to be able to source equipment like speakers and mixing tables and whatever equipment a florist needs. There sometimes are outside vendor fees, so you may be looking at paying an extra few $100s for a vendor if you hire someone that is not a resort vendor. We found very early on that our resorts fees and most resorts fees when it comes to things like decor and flowers were extremely high. So when we decided to look at rental companies and things like that in the area, we realized that the prices were super inflated at the resort, and these were probably the vendors that the resort was hiring themselves. So you may end up spending an extra $200 or $300 per vendor if you're bringing them in from outside. However, you're gonna be saving thousands of dollars in the long run when it comes to not paying those inflated resort prices. Of course, it's important to remember that if you're getting married somewhere like Honduras, that they're gonna have a lot less to offer when it comes to wedding and decor rentals than somewhere like Cancun in Mexico. As far as bringing your own decor from home, it's definitely doable. We packed a bunch of stuff in Tupperware, Rubbermaid bins, not so much for decor, but some small signage, some gift bags that we were bringing down. Another thing that we didn't really think about, but we found out as we were going through customs, is that if you personalize anything, that it is considered a taxable item, so you're gonna have to pay duty and taxes on all of those things that you are then importing into the country. Even if they are leaving 7 days later, it doesn't matter. One of the other things you definitely need to consider, selfishly from a photography standpoint, is the type of photographer that you're going to be hiring if you decide to go with the resort photographer. So resort photographers and videographers are typically the same people that are teaching you how to make guacamole in the morning and teaching salsa dancing later at night. They're definitely not trained to the same level that you're expecting a professional photographer to be trained. They're not gonna have the same equipment, and that equipment is going to be run ragged over the number of weddings that they do in very rough conditions, in the sun, in the heat, with sand and salt always getting into those cameras. So there's a lot of issues that you could run into. Obviously, they're gonna know the resort pretty well, but a professional photographer from home might not even have more than an hour to get their bearings at a venue locally. So if you give them a 2-day period to figure out the venue once they get there, they can absolutely get their bearings and find some really beautiful locations for you to shoot. This way you can work with them ahead of time at your engagement shoot, get to know them a little bit better, and absolutely know what the deliverable is in the end. Some resorts may charge you $1,500 to $2,000 for your photography package, but that might include a DVD with 200 images, and if you want to purchase any more, you have to purchase them per image after that, or you might be spending an exorbitant amount to buy all of the images from them. They may not be edited to your liking, they may not be edited at all, and when you get home and try to load them into your computer, you certainly run some risks of them being a lower resolution, or as I've heard in some really horrible instances, they may not even be on the DVD or USB key that you bring home. In my opinion, it's really just not worth the risk, especially when you can hire some really great people locally in your own area. But you do you. I totally understand budget restrictions. Just keep in mind that it may not actually be any more budget friendly. It might actually cost you a lot more money to hire a resort photographer or videographer. Okay, so we've gone over narrowing down your venue, your area that you're thinking of getting married in, some things to think about when you're choosing the resort itself, the wedding package, your vendors. So you're like, okay, so how do I even get started with this whole thing? So the first thing you have to do is find a travel agent. Not every travel agent does group bookings. And while they may do commercial or corporate group bookings, doing a wedding is an entirely different ball game. So they have to help you figure out not just planning a trip, but also in some ways planning a wedding. We went through a few travel agents before finding the incredible woman, Miss Christine Cardoza. She worked from home. She was the perfect fit for us. She was a hard worker. She answered all of my emails really quickly, which is so important when you're planning a destination wedding. You're dealing with so many different moving parts, whether it's the resort, your wedding planner down at the resort, all of your vendors locally, your guests, your parents asking you questions. There are just so many things to figure out that you definitely need somebody that's attentive and responsive. So when we found Christine, she helped us go through that process that I was talking about of narrowing down the location, the price, the resorts, and the amenities that they offered for weddings. And then once we made a decision, it was really all in her hands. So we put together a wedding website that gave all of our guests the information that they needed on the resort, the dates that we were going, the room types that the resort offered, a little bit of information about the wedding itself, even just the date and time that we were expecting things to be happening. But at this stage in the game, it was still about a year out. And then from there, your travel agent will take deposits, she'll book everyone in, and then you basically just wait until final booking payments are due. So most of your guests can book in for $200, maybe $300 just to put the deposit down. And then depending on who you end up booking with, whether it be Air Transat, Air Canada Vacations, WestJet, whichever group that you end up booking your package through, that will determine what the final payment structure is like, what all the final details are. But at that point, you're gonna be a destination wedding pro, so I probably don't even need to tell you all about that. So if you are thinking of booking a destination wedding, I hope this gives you a very solid overview of what might be involved in booking and planning a destination wedding. I'll put all of the information of the resort that we booked, the vendors we use, down in the description below. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to them. Also, just let me know in the comments if you have any questions, anything that I missed, anything that you wish that you knew still, just let me know. And of course, if you're having your own destination wedding, you're a bride in Ontario, and you're looking to meet a really great photographer, that was super lame. You're like, oh, I'm not gonna hire that girl now. All right, well, what can I say?